Italy, 1933. Italian dictator Benito Mussolini has been in power for a decade. He knows Italy isn't a great power yet, but he believes he can get there with the right leverage. When World War I ended, France was really mad at Germany and punished Germany super hard with reparations, territorial concessions. Basically, they blamed Germany for the deadliest war Europe had ever seen, and they wanted Germany to pay for all the damage done across the continent. So in the 1920s and 30s, Germany was in economic ruins and was really mad at France. According to the Treaty of Versailles, signed at the end of World War I, Germany wasn't allowed to build up its army again, but little by little they'd been bending the rules. Some training exercises with the Soviets here, some private armies there. Some secret experiments here, some weapons from Mussolini there. Mussolini sees Germany on course for a war of revenge against France, and he thinks if he can be on the winning side of that war, then Italy can finally make it big. And good news, Mussolini! In 1933, Hitler comes to power in Germany, and he's wanted an alliance with Italy since the 20s. Fascismos are fascist bros, am I right? Oh, but bad news, Hitler is getting ready to Anschluss everybody. I mean, he is getting ready to steal any piece of land that isn't nailed down. In particular, he really wants to take over all of the places that speak German. That's bad for Italy because they may have taken a little piece of German-speaking land after the end of World War I. Good news, Hitler wrote in his book that the German speakers in Italy don't even matter to him because he wants an alliance with Italy so bad. Bad news, Italy's ally Austria also speaks a lot of German, and Hitler is a compulsive liar. No regular sponsor on this video. If you want to visit Japan with me, May 2025, we're touring historic sites with awesome local guides. Algorithm didn't like that announcement video, so I want to make sure everybody who might want to go gets to hear about it. There's a link below with more info. I went in 2023. I loved it so much I came back to live there for 6 months. Amazing experience. Also, big thanks to my patrons. My next 2 videos are over on Patreon in script form, available for all paid members. So Mussolini would really like to keep Austria around as a buffer state between himself and Hitler. Hitler is really not happy about that. He goes all the way to Italy to meet Mussolini in person. Mein Freund, will you at least tell the Austrians to put just a few Nazis in charge of their country?
And why would I do that?
Because Nazi domination is inevitable.
So why do you need my help?
You are too smart. You see right through my cunning charade. We will not meddle in Austria. Italy is too strong and powerful for us to make you angry. The next month, the Chancellor of Austria is assassinated. Hitler says he has no idea how that happened. I mean, yes, the assassins were Nazis, but they weren't German Nazis. They were Austrian Nazis, and they're very naughty boys. But anyway, it looks like the Austrian Nazis are doing a coup, and maybe the German Nazis could help them out just a little bit. Except, Mussolini sends his army to the border with Austria and says Hitler better not try it. And shoot, he doesn't. Hitler backs down with his tail between his legs. Of all the European powers, the one that actually stopped Hitler from doing Hitler things was fascist Italy. Mussolini, now properly angry, decides to make an alliance with France in 1934 in order to declare war on Germany if Hitler's army ever sets foot in Austria. In April 1935, Italy, France, and the UK get together and say Hitler has gone far enough. They are all committed to the independence of Austria and making sure Germany's military doesn't get even a tiny bit stronger. This actually happened. Mussolini was teaming up with the good guys in order to end appeasement, spearhead a possible war against Hitler, and maybe that timeline could have prevented the invasion of Poland or the fall of France. Unfortunately, 2 months later, Hitler bats his eyes at Britain, says, "Oh, pretty please." And Prime Minister MacDonald says, "Oh, come on. You know I can't say no to those puppy dog eyes. You can have a bigger navy, but there's gonna be a new red line, and this time we really mean it." So that ship had sailed. Interestingly, Hitler at the time was actually thinking he might be able to form an alliance with Britain against France and the USSR. That would have been an interesting timeline, but obviously that didn't go anywhere. Now it's October 1935, and even though Hitler's still moving the goalposts, there's hope that an alliance of France, Britain, and Italy will be enough to keep Germany contained. Except Mussolini, being fascist, thinks he should be allowed to have a big colonial empire just like everybody else, so he goes and invades Ethiopia. This puts Britain and France in a pickle. They could stand up for their morals and intervene on behalf of Ethiopia against Italy, yes, but yikes! World War I was big and scary and awful, and they really don't want to do that again. And if they go to war with Italy, they will be losing a valuable ally in the fight against Hitler, who is still the greater evil, no matter how hard Mussolini tries. But if France and Britain let Italy get away with this, besides tacitly subjecting Ethiopia to colonial rule by literal fascists, they'll also be setting a really bad example. So instead, they chose a third option. And it's somehow even worse. When Italy invades Ethiopia, France and Britain convince the League of Nations to pass sanctions on Italy. Kinda weak sanctions. They tried to convince Italy to maybe take just part of Ethiopia while they continued to trade oil with them. And when Italian ships sailed through the Suez Canal on their way to bring soldiers to Ethiopia, the British troops controlling the canal said, "We'll let you in, but we're not happy about it." So Mussolini still conquers Ethiopia with relative ease, and he's mad at Britain and France for imposing sanctions on him. Meanwhile, here's Germany, who still wants to be buddies. For Hitler, this was an absolute win, because he looks over his shoulder and sees another fascist dictator being given a free pass to invade another country, and now, the only guy who would actually go to war with him over Austria is ready to be friends. Thus, in 1936, Germany and Italy sign their Best Friends Forever Protocol. They're going to support the fascists in Spain. Italy agrees to represent Germany's interests in the League of Nations, and Germany agrees to recognize the Italian Empire in Ethiopia. And Hitler passes Mussolini a note in the back of the class saying he'll be ready for war against Britain and France in 3 years. The clock is ticking. Meanwhile, 5,000 miles away, Japan is getting ready to make a big decision. Like Italy, Japan was going through a breakup with Britain. Back in 1902, Britain and Japan entered an alliance that proved to be terrifically helpful for the Japanese. When Japan went to war with Russia, France was tempted to join the Russian side, but the thought of war with Britain kept them out of it. Then in World War I, the alliance acted as Japan's official RSVP to join the war, score some easy wins, and sit at the negotiating table. For 20 years, Britain was a solid ally and trading partner. Unfortunately, at a certain point, British attitudes toward Japan had cooled, and there were fears, even in 1921, that the US and Japan might one day go to war, in which case, sorry, but Britain didn't want to get pulled into a war against the US. Then, Japan takes over northeast China in 1931 and turns it into a puppet state called Manchukuo, and suddenly they're neighbors with the Soviet Union, and they start having border disputes. For a while, the Japanese army was seriously debating whether they wanted to continue expanding south into China or maybe go north into Russia. That might be a little trickier, but they knew where to find allies, because it just so happened that a certain German mustachioed man-child had his own reasons to dislike the Soviets. And as far as making an alliance with Japan goes, I am singling out Hitler and not the attitude of all of Germany for a reason. Germany had been investing in China for a long time. The Nazis actually sent a guy over to China to reorganize the Chinese army and make it more fascist. German businessmen liked China. It seemed like a lot of German diplomats liked China. One of Hitler's right-hand men was telling him an alliance with Japan would be terrible because Japan was going to pull in Italy and switch sides if they ever fought a war together. But Hitler and his foreign affairs minister had a thing for Japan. So in 1936, the same year that Germany and Italy signed their super best friends pact, Germany and Japan sign an anti-communist pact. Germany tried to pretend they hadn't just double-crossed China by inviting China to be a part of this totally unrelated alliance with China's biggest enemy, but, you know, Hitler was an opportunistic, bald-faced liar and a Nazi, so when Japan invaded China in 1937 and seemed to be doing all right, the Nazis decided might makes right and began cheering for the death of their erstwhile ally. Shortly thereafter, Hitler declared the Japanese to be honorary Aryans, or in German, expedient. Italy had also been trying to court Japan for a while in attempts to win over Britain, but Japan wouldn't give them the time of day because they didn't want to upset Britain any more than they had to. It wasn't until Japan invaded China again in 1937 and made itself an international pariah that Mussolini was waiting with a big stupid grin on his face. Italy joined the anti-communist pact with Germany and Japan, and the Axis was kinda sorta complete. Then, surprise! A week before World War II, Hitler signs a treaty with the communists. Italy and Japan are both blindsided. Not only has Hitler just promised to cooperate with Russia, he has also promised not to ally with any of the USSR's enemies. You know, like, say, hypothetically, a bunch of countries who had signed an anti-communist pact. Hitler makes up this whole story about how the anti-communist alliance was actually targeted against Western democracies, and Japan is like, what the fuck? No, it's not! We literally named it the Agreement Against the Communist International! Dude! Hitler then invades Poland in September 1939, not with support from the Axis, but from Stalin. France and Britain finally declare war on Germany and somehow continue to do nothing for 8 months. Come June 1940, France is absolutely steamrolled, and Mussolini, feeling a little insecure about the size of his own empire, leaps into the war, hoping to get a seat at the table at the last possible minute. You know you don't have to be a part of this.
I'm in it, baby. Fascismos are fascist bros.
Only in September 1940, a year into the war in Europe, do all three members of the Axis formally ally with each other. Japan still wasn't exactly happy with Germany, but Hitler was somehow able to convince them, I'm not double-crossing you. I crossed China to you, crossed you to Russia, and then I'm going to cross Russia back to you. That's double-crossing. Uncrossed, then crossed back over. You're uncrossed! You know what? We gave up on invading Russia anyway. Friends? Yes, friends, don't... Stop doing that. I don't like it. Don't make me change my mind. Contrary to Mussolini's expectations, the war was not a 20-minute adventure where he could trade a few thousand dead Italians in exchange for free real estate. France went down quickly, but Italy was still fighting concurrent fronts in North and East Africa. And then, perhaps feeling a little insecure about the performance of his empire, Mussolini, with no warning to his allies, launches a third front in Greece. He then starts losing the war in Greece, opening up a convenient way for the British army to attack Germany from the rear. German command tells Hitler that Mussolini did something stupid and now they've got to invade Greece to cover for him. Hitler says, "He did what? That idiot! Hold my beer, we are invading Russia!" And on top of invading Greece, he catapults the German army into the USSR, again with zero warning to any of his allies. From the Japanese perspective, this entire alliance with Germany is basically useless now, because how the heck are Japan and Germany supposed to supply each other when the only uncontested trading route between them just got blitzkrieged? And yet, Japan was undeterred. He did what? Hold my Nihonshu, we're bombing America! And then when Hitler found out... Now, before I give you the news, I want to gently remind you that the Axis is a defensive alliance, and we do not have to declare war on anyone. The Japanese He did what? Hold my second beer! We're going to war with America! It is worth appreciating just how many enemies the Axis made. This is a map of the world. The blue is the Axis, and the green is everyone they upset enough to go to war with them. To think that 3 countries... Oh wait, the Axis wasn't just 3 countries. Let me introduce you to the circus's supporting cast. So there were a couple of other fascist governments that thought World War II sounded like a good time. Hungary joined for a little, quote, murder tourism that made the Germans uncomfortable. Romania joined to take back land from the USSR, even though they lost that land in the first place because of Hitler's agreement with the Soviets. Finland was a weird one, the only democracy to fight with the Axis powers, although they never signed the alliance and were mostly just fighting over some land that the Russians took from them. And then Iraq, in the middle of nowhere out here, they randomly became fascist in 1941. Suffice to say, the Axis was not so much a unified ideology, so much as a table full of ostracized school children telling themselves they're cooler than everybody else anyway. Instead of uniting to fight a single war against Britain and France, each one of these knobs started like 5 different wars and forced the others to cover for them. Japan loses like 5 final climactic battles in a row to the United States and has no one to cover for them. Italy lives up to its reputation as the soft underbelly of Europe, gets half liberated by the Allies in 1943. When that happens, Mussolini gets sacked and arrested by his own government. He's broken out of jail by the Germans, but I imagine his reaction was something like,
Hooray! Oh, you're not Italian. Why am I not happy to be getting out of prison right now? Fascist bros.
Mussolini is placed under house arrest by the Germans and made the figurehead of the puppet state they set up in northern Italy, but the Allied advance doesn't stop. Pretty soon, Mussolini is executed, and Germany's plans for world domination become, how do we slow down the Soviets long enough to surrender to the West? Hitler auditions for a redemption arc by killing Hitler, but he doesn't get the part. Japan got bombed, Eastern Europe got the Iron Curtain, and to be honest, we all just kind of forgot about Finland.